AITA my girlfriend invited me to her family's expensive restaurant, and then they wanted me to pay for everything because it's their tradition and my girlfriend forgot to tell me. I was shocked. So, I've been dating my girlfriend, Emily, for about a year now. She's amazing, funny, kind, incredibly smart. We get along great, and while we've had our fair share of small disagreements, nothing major has ever come between us. Up until this moment, I would have said that we were solid, that we really understood each other. Now, I had met her parents before. A handful of times, actually. Her mom and dad were always polite, though a little formal. I wouldn't say we were super close, but I never got the impression they disliked me. This dinner, though, this was different. This was a big family gathering at a really nice restaurant. Not just her parents, but her two older brothers, her aunt and uncle, and her grandparents. It was the kind of dinner where you dress up a little, which I did. And honestly, I was looking forward to it. I liked Emily's family well enough, and I figured this was just another step in our relationship, getting to know them better, sharing a nice meal together, showing them that I was a good guy for their daughter. The evening started out fine. The restaurant was upscale, definitely not the kind of place I'd go to on a random Tuesday, but it wasn't crazy over the top either. Just fancy enough that you knew the bill was going to be significant. Everyone was in a great mood. Her brothers cracked jokes, her uncle was telling stories, and her grandparents, especially her grandmother, were the sweet, old-fashioned type who kept squeezing Emily's hand and saying how lovely it was to have the family together. It was a genuinely good time. And let me just say, they were not holding back when it came to ordering. Cocktails, appetizers, premium entrees. It was the kind of meal where no one even glanced at the prices. I didn't think anything of it at the time because, well, why would I? I assumed this was just a big family dinner where everyone was enjoying themselves. I ordered a steak and a drink, nothing excessive, but I wasn't exactly pinching pennies either. Because, again, I thought this was just a normal family dinner. Then, the check arrived. And the waiter, without hesitation, handed it directly to me. For a split second, I laughed. I thought it was a mistake. Maybe he thought I was the host or something. But then, Emily's dad leaned back in his chair, smiling, and said, "Welcome to the family, son. It's tradition." I looked at him, still half expecting him to say he was joking. But he wasn't. He was dead serious. I glanced at Emily, waiting for some kind of explanation, and she just nodded casually and said, "Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, when someone new joins the family, they treat everyone to dinner." My stomach dropped. Now, let me be clear, I am not cheap. I have no problem covering a bill when it's appropriate. But this was a $1,000 dinner, and no one had even mentioned this tradition to me beforehand. No heads up, no warning, no chance to prepare. It was just dropped on me, right then and there, with everyone watching. I asked if they were serious. Her dad, still smiling like this was some kind of heartwarming initiation ritual, nodded. Her uncle made a comment about how young men these days don't know how to step up. Her grandmother sighed and shook her head, clearly disappointed. And Emily? She just leaned in and whispered, "Can we just go along with it? It's not a big deal." I looked at the bill again, then back at everyone else at the table, and said, "I'll pay for myself and Emily, but I'm not covering everyone." The mood changed instantly. It was like I had insulted them all personally. Her dad's face darkened. He said I was being disrespectful. Her uncle let out a scoff and muttered something under his breath. Her brothers exchanged looks like I had just failed some kind of secret test. Emily looked at me like I was the one making things awkward. "Seriously?" she whispered. "It's just tradition." "Yeah, and you didn't tell me about it," I said. "If you had, I would have told you no ahead of time." At this point, the whole table was tense. I signaled for the waiter, handed him my card, and told him I was covering just myself and Emily. The rest of the family scrambled to figure out how to split the rest of the bill, which, judging by their reactions, wasn't something they were expecting to do. I didn't linger. As soon as the check was settled, I got up and left. Emily followed me out, but she wasn't exactly on my side. She kept saying I should have just gone along with it, that it wasn't a big deal, that I had embarrassed her family. I told her this was insane. Who just drops a $1,000 expectation on someone with zero warning? She didn't have a great answer for that. She just kept saying it was tradition, like that somehow made it okay. Now, days later, I'm still getting messages. Some are from her dad, others from her brothers. The general tone is that I disrespected their family, that I made a scene, that I failed some kind of unspoken test. Emily is still upset. She thinks I overreacted, that I should have just paid and moved on. But honestly, I don't think I was wrong. If they had told me in advance, maybe we could have had a conversation about it. But to spring that on me at the table, in front of everyone, and just expect me to eat the cost? No way. So, am I the asshole? Update 1. Well, I woke up the next morning to an essay-long text from Emily's brother, Josh. And when I say essay-long, I mean it. Paragraphs upon paragraphs, breaking down exactly how and why I had failed not just their family but their entire family culture. The moment my phone lit up with his name and I saw the sheer length of the message, I knew it wasn't going to be an apology or an attempt to smooth things over. No, this was a manifesto, a full-blown lecture on my shortcomings as a man, as a boyfriend, and apparently, as a future member of their sacred lineage. The first dinner tradition, according to him, had been around for decades. Everyone knew about it. He made it sound like some ancient rite of passage, something that had been ingrained in their family history long before I had the audacity to exist. It wasn't just a meal, it was a test, a symbolic moment that every new partner had to endure, a way of proving commitment, of showing that they truly deserved to be part of the family. He framed it like some noble custom, something that was just as important as a wedding or a major life event. And then he dropped the examples, as if he had been preparing an airtight legal case against me from the moment I refused to pay. His now wife? She had paid without hesitation when she first met the family. His cousin's husband? Same thing. His aunt's wife? You guessed it, happily covered the bill as part of the tradition. It was just how things worked in their family. No complaints, no arguments, just quiet compliance. And by refusing, I hadn't just made a social misstep, I had insulted them. I had disrespected not just them as individuals, but their entire history, their values, their way of doing things. I sat there rereading the message, my mind caught between disbelief and sheer frustration, trying to process the absurdity of it all. It wasn't even the fact that they expected someone new to pay. If they had brought this up beforehand, maybe we could have had a conversation about it. Maybe I could have considered it, or at the very least, mentally prepared for the expectation. But no. They hadn't given me that courtesy. They had sprung it on me, with zero warning, zero discussion, just a smug little nod and a collective assumption that I would fall in line like all the others before me. That I would, without hesitation, just whip out my wallet and drop a four-figure sum on a dinner I wasn't prepared for. That I would prove myself by playing along with this ridiculous hazing ritual. And because I didn't, because I had the nerve to assert my own boundaries, I was now being painted as the villain in their family saga. I didn't respond right away. I needed time to fully absorb the sheer entitlement in his message. Instead, I turned to the one person who should have had my back in all of this, Emily. I asked her, point blank, if she had really forgotten to tell me about this tradition, or if she had just assumed I would go along with it. And that's when the real kicker came. She admitted, without even looking remotely guilty, that she didn't forget. She chose not to tell me. She said it so casually, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. She knew I would say no. She knew I would refuse, and she didn't want to deal with the argument. That was her reasoning. Not that she thought it wasn't a big deal. Not that she had genuinely forgotten. No, she had made a conscious decision to withhold this information from me because she knew I wouldn't be on board. She knew it was unfair, but instead of talking to me about it, she just let it happen. She decided it would be easier to throw me into the fire and let the pressure of the moment break me than to have a conversation in advance and risk me refusing outright. I just sat there, staring at her, trying to wrap my head around what she was saying. She knew it was wrong. She knew I wouldn't be okay with it. And rather than having a mature, adult conversation, she chose to put me in a situation where she thought I wouldn't have an escape. She didn't just forget, she set me up. She made a calculated decision to trap me in a position where I would have to either pay or look like the bad guy. And now that I hadn't played along, now that I had drawn a line and refused to be manipulated, I was the selfish one. I was the problem. I asked her if she even realized how manipulative that was. If she truly understood how insane it was to deliberately set me up like that, to orchestrate a situation where I would be forced to pay and then act like I was the one being unreasonable when I didn't. And do you know what she said? She looked me right in the eye, as if I was the one making a big deal out of nothing, and said, "It's not manipulation, it's tradition." And that's when it all clicked for me. This wasn't about the dinner. This wasn't about welcoming me into the family or celebrating a new relationship. This was about control. This was about expectations. This was about their family deciding that their traditions, their way of doing things, mattered more than basic respect or communication. It wasn't about inviting someone into their circle, it was about testing them. Seeing if they would fall in line, if they would accept the unspoken rules without hesitation, without question. And Emily had fully bought into it. She expected me to just comply, to just go along with it, because in her mind, that's what a real partner does. A real partner doesn't ask questions. A real partner doesn't push back. A real partner simply knows that when the bill arrives, they hand over their credit card and prove their worth. I didn't even argue after that. What was the point? She didn't see a problem with what she did. She didn't see an issue with blindsiding me, with springing an insane financial expectation on me without so much as a warning. She didn't think it was unfair or dishonest or even remotely manipulative. She just saw it as tradition. And honestly, that's when I started wondering if the only reason I was even invited was to foot the bill. Update 2. So things got worse. The tension between Emily and me had been simmering ever since that night at the restaurant, and it finally boiled over when we sat down to have a long, uncomfortable conversation about everything that had happened. I had been holding out some hope that she would see my side of things, that she would at least acknowledge how unfair the situation had been. Instead, what I got was a confession that completely floored me. She admitted that her family used the first dinner tradition as a test. It wasn't just a quirky custom or a fun initiation into their family, it was a deliberate way to gauge how serious someone was. If you paid without hesitation, it meant you were committed, that you understood your role, that you were willing to provide and take on responsibility without question. If you pushed back, that meant you weren't ready. It meant you weren't truly invested in being part of the family. It meant you had failed. I sat there, completely stunned, as she explained this like it was the most natural thing in the world. As if it was completely reasonable to set up an unannounced financial ambush and judge someone's worth based on their reaction. It wasn't about generosity, it wasn't about kindness, it wasn't even about tradition, it was about control. A loyalty test disguised as a family bonding moment, where the only correct answer was to shut up and open your wallet. I told her flat out that this wasn't a test, it was manipulation. A setup. A deliberate ploy to see how much someone would tolerate before breaking. And instead of seeing my point, instead of realizing how twisted the whole thing was, she doubled down. She looked at me like I was the one who didn't understand, like I was the problem for not immediately seeing the logic behind it. Then she hit me with a question that nearly made my jaw drop. If we got married, wouldn't you do things for my family without questioning it? That's when I realized we weren't just talking about this dinner anymore. This wasn't just about one bad night or one shady tradition, this was about the entire mindset her family operated under. The expectation that I would put their needs above my own, that I would accept their traditions without hesitation, that I would provide as some sort of unspoken duty. That my value as a partner wasn't based on who I was as a person, but on how willing I was to spend for them. I told her that doing things for family is completely different from being tricked into them. That generosity should come from the heart, not from some forced sense of obligation. That marriage isn't about silently complying with financial expectations you weren't even warned about. That trust and respect should go both ways. Her response: "Maybe this isn't going to work then." And that was it. That was the moment I knew we were done. I had already been leaning toward ending things, already questioning if I could really be with someone who thought this was normal, but this was the final straw. It wasn't just that she refused to see the problem, it was that she fully believed in what her family was doing. She didn't see anything wrong with it. She wasn't just complicit in their mindset, she was actively upholding it. And I wasn't about to sign up for a lifetime of being treated like a walking ATM just to prove my worth. I told her I wasn't interested in being part of a family that operated like this. That if being with her meant constantly proving myself through financial sacrifices, I was out. She called me selfish. Said I wasn't willing to make an effort. Said I didn't get what it meant to be family. I left. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I had officially walked away from the most bizarre relationship experience of my life. But then, later that night, I got a message that completely changed the way I looked at the situation. It was from Josh's wife. The woman who, according to Josh, had so graciously paid for her own first dinner when she joined the family. Her message was short, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. I wish I had done what you did. I wasn't sure what she meant at first, but then she elaborated. She hadn't wanted to pay for that dinner either. She hadn't gone into it knowing what was expected of her. Just like me, she had been blindsided by the bill, pressured into footing the cost, made to feel like she had no choice. And she had paid, not because she wanted to, not because she agreed with the tradition, but because she had felt like it was the only way to be accepted. She hadn't known how to say no. And now, she regretted it. She told me that this wasn't a one-time thing. That Emily's family had many traditions like this. Traditions that all followed the same pattern, where the men in the family were expected to prove their worth financially. Silent tests, unspoken rules, obligations that no one ever said out loud but were expected to be followed nonetheless. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about family. It was about power. About ensuring that the men who joined their family knew their place, as providers, as earners, as people who didn't ask questions but simply paid up when it was expected of them. She warned me that Emily's family has many traditions like this, most of which involve the men proving their worth financially. Update 3. Breaking up with Emily turned out to be the best decision I could have made. The moment I walked away from that conversation, it was like a weight had lifted off my shoulders. It wasn't just relief, it was clarity. No more trying to rationalize the irrational, no more bending over backward to justify things that never should have needed justification in the first place. I had spent too much time second-guessing myself, wondering if I had overreacted, if there was some angle I wasn't seeing, some way to make sense of what had happened. But in that moment, it all became simple. This wasn't about a misunderstanding or a different perspective. This was about control. And I had walked away from it before I got in too deep. But of course, Emily's family didn't take it that way. They went into full damage control, twisting the narrative to make it seem like I was the one who had ruined everything. It wasn't that they had set me up, or that they had trapped me in some bizarre financial loyalty test, it was that I had failed to meet their standards. That I had embarrassed them. That I had shown my true colors by walking away instead of falling in line. And they weren't subtle about it either. The messages started rolling in, first from Emily, then from her brothers, her parents, and eventually even a couple of extended family members I hadn't even met that night. Some were dripping with condescension, passive-aggressive jabs about how I clearly wasn't ready for a serious relationship. Others were outright hostile, as if my refusal to pay had been some kind of direct attack on their entire lineage. The theme was always the same, though. I had disrespected their tradition, and because of that, I had proven I wasn't worthy of being with Emily. Emily herself sent me one last message, and if I had still been on the fence about my decision, that text would have shoved me right over. She told me she had expected me to at least apologize for embarrassing her family. That even if I had disagreed, I should have handled it better. That I had put her in a terrible position and made her family think less of her. It was astonishing. There was no acknowledgement of what she had done, no realization that she had been the one to set me up, no understanding of why I had reacted the way I did. Just an expectation that I would swallow my pride, take the blame, and ask for forgiveness for having the audacity to stand up for myself. I stared at the message for a long time, letting it sink in. The sheer entitlement of it. The complete unwillingness to take any accountability. The way she had framed the entire situation around her embarrassment, as if I had been the one to create the problem in the first place. It was so ridiculous, so completely detached from reality, that I didn't even feel anger anymore. Just exhaustion. I left her on read. And that was that. I thought that was going to be the last of it, that I had walked away clean. But then, out of nowhere, I got a message from someone I never expected, Emily's aunt. I didn't even remember her name at first, but I recognized her from dinner, sitting a few seats down, chiming in here and there but never really engaging when things got heated. Her message was short but direct. She told me she had no idea that Emily hadn't warned me about the dinner beforehand, and she thought the whole thing was in poor taste. And then, almost as an afterthought, she admitted something that completely shifted my perspective: not everyone in the family actually agrees with the tradition. Some of them, including her, had always found it outdated, unnecessary, even a little cruel. But no one spoke up. No one ever spoke up. It was just easier to go along with it than to deal with the fallout of pushing back. That stuck with me. The way she phrased it, the way she almost seemed resigned to it. This wasn't just something Emily's family did, this was something they enforced. Even if people disagreed, even if they thought it was unfair, they stayed quiet. Because that's what was expected. And that's when I realized how deep this actually ran. This wasn't just a one-time thing, a quirky family tradition that got taken too far. This was an entire system built around silent compliance. It was about making sure everyone knew their place, that no one questioned the expectations placed on them. And the fact that no one had ever refused before. That wasn't a coincidence. That was by design. They had created an environment where saying no wasn't even considered an option. And if you did, you were the problem. And then came the biggest twist of all. Emily's grandmother, the same woman who had sat at the table that night shaking her head in disappointment, the one whose reaction had stuck with me more than any of the others, reached out. It was a simple message, no theatrics, no anger, just an observation that caught me completely off guard. She told me she had never seen someone actually refuse before. In all the years of this so-called tradition, every single person had gone along with it. Some begrudgingly, some willingly, but no one had ever drawn a line and said no. And in a way, she respected it. She said something that summed up the entire situation better than I ever could have: if they can't handle being told no, they shouldn't expect so much. That was it. That was the core of it. This wasn't about money. It wasn't about tradition. It was about entitlement. It was about a family that had spent so long getting away with something that they never even considered the possibility that someone would refuse. They had built this whole system around compliance, around unspoken expectations, around testing people in ways that were designed to make them feel like they had no choice. And the moment someone did say no, they didn't know how to handle it. They called it tradition, but really, it was just control wrapped in ceremony. A test where the only right answer was to prove that you were willing to play along, no matter how ridiculous the demand. And I had failed their test, not because I wasn't serious about Emily, not because I wasn't willing to do things for her family, but because I saw it for what it was and refused to be a part of it. And that was something they couldn't accept. So yeah. Single again. No regrets. I got out before I had to spend years proving myself in ways that had nothing to do with love, respect, or actual commitment. And the best part? I didn't have to spend $1,000 to find out who I was really dealing with.